What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video. And even though we're well past Halloween, we're going to be looking at the Boogeyman of the Pioneer format. A deck that really probably shouldn't exist and kind of exists on accident when you really think about it and you think about its origin and everything. And always a deck that's important to look over as it stands as a pillar of the format. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Mono Green Devotion deck for the Pioneer format and really more or less diving into why the deck is very powerful and exactly why people keep playing it, even though we have various amounts of other decks that are essentially built to just try to beat it and how it still manages to find success in the format. So let's go ahead, jump over, and take a look at the Mono Green Devotion deck for Pioneer. So here we have Nykthos Ramp, aka Mono Green Devotion, piloted by Wordy333 to a third place finish in the Pioneer Challenge this past weekend, getting third place at a 6-1 finish. Before we get too deep into the deck, of course, I have to say, please subscribe to the channel if you have not already done so, and ring the notification bell so you know when I post videos such as this, other videos to do with the modern format, and of course, various other topics as well. And while we're at it, there is a link in the description of this video to the Discord server that you can join for free. Go ahead and hang out, talk about magic, and all that fun and happy stuff. So let's go ahead and jump into the Mono Green Devotion deck. Essentially, the idea of this deck is to play a bunch of permanents that have green mana symbols in them to maximize the amount of mana that you make with Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, which cares about adding an amount of mana equal to the devotion of a color of your choice. Essentially, you then try to like spend tons of mana casting other Cavalier Thorns, preferably like Storm the Festivals and things like that, to put multiple, hopefully green devoted permanents into play. This deck in particular that's different from other versions is playing Sky Sovereign in the main, where you would see like two copies of it here in the sideboard, where you would mainly see it in the sideboard. It's very good at controlling some of the other like aggressive decks in the format. Mono Green does a very good job, like after like turn 4, really being able to gum up the board with Old Growth Trolls, Cavalier Thorns, and Lovestruck Beasts. This is kind of its way, really, with like Lovestruck Beast and Sky Sovereign, being able to make the aggressive matchups less bad. The reason why you would have cards like Boros Heroic and why you have like the Atarka Red and Mono Red decks like thriving in the format, even though there's a mid-range deck that is arguably one of the best decks in the format, is because they would chew up and spit out the Mono Green Devotion deck. While they would have like their Elvish Mystics and their Land of War Elves and other things like that, that they could just leave back and block. They didn't want to do that because Elvish Mystic and Land of War Elves makes a ton of mana and goes towards a bigger game plan of just getting to cast a bunch of these big things and get enough devotion that you can go infinite with Kiora, Karn, and Pestilent Cauldron slash Restorative Burst. But aside from that, really, this deck has decided to shore up its matchups like in the early game. Lovestruck Beast just being a big creature. It can't attack unless you control a 1/1, but the fact that it's just 3 mana 5/5, it blocks very, very well. Takes multiple spells plus a combat to actually beat the Lovestruck Beast, and even then, that like, could like propel you into like the later game where you're casting like Cavalier Thorns, where again it's now another card that takes multiple spells to get rid of, that can then rebuy a Lovestruck Beast or maybe another Cavalier, Old Growth Troll, things like that, and just make it very hard for your opponent to beat you on the ground. Where this was kind of the weakness of the mono green decks, was just being soft to the more aggressive decks in the format that were basically going to ignore what they were doing in a different way that the combo decks were necessarily ignoring them. And would be a great time to explain, I guess, the combo of the deck and why it unfortunately accidentally exists. You have Kiora and you have Karn the Great Creator. Kiora can untap target permanent, which means that if you have enough devotion and you make enough mana, which I believe the cutoff is 15 mana, you can untap Nykthos, add a bunch of mana, Karn to go get Pestilent Cauldron, which will let you cast Restorative Burst, which essentially then you can return, if you have another copy of Kiora and Karn, you can return them to your hand with Restorative Burst, or if you're going to get a card like Hardic Kieran, you're able to just remove all the counters from Kiora and Karn to crew it, which then means that you can pick up these cards with Restorative Burst. Restorative Burst gets exiled, which means it gets exiled as Pestilent Cauldron. You can recast Karn and Kiora and essentially repeat the process. Uh, with Karn being able to get like other cards, like you end up getting the Chain Veil, and eventually you're able to make enough mana to where you can play the Chain Veil. You can get multiple activations out of these a turn, and eventually just I believe the online way of doing it is essentially using like Pestilent Cauldron to like mill your opponent. Like you can play Cauldron. Some of them were playing like a Overgrown Tomb. It doesn't look like this deck is, but you could also just make a ton of like 1/1s and kill your opponent that way. Uh, so that's like the combo, that's like the draw of the deck. You also now have this element like getting to play Love Struck Beast, All-Grow Troll, Cavalier Thorns, where you could kind of transform into a more aggressive deck. You have, again, Sky Sovereign, Console Flagship, a 6 power, essentially creature for 5 mana that gets crewed by all of your other creatures or like a bunch of your little small 1/1 creatures that can swing tempo in your favor against other aggressive decks or even other mid-range decks just by getting to shoot like one of their creatures that are planeswalkers, hopefully get rid of it, and then Sky Sovereign getting to chunk in for a ton of damage, leaving back a lot of like your other big creatures. Aside from all that, the rest of the deck is normal. You have the Storm of the Festivals, which if you mill over with Cavalier, you can essentially cast, for free. It's like essentially drawing it, because like casting this for 10 mana from the graveyard is like nothing. You have the two layer of the Hydras. You have Boseiju for any weird like shenanigans like pithing needles and things like that. Uh, the sideboard you have like Bank Buster, which can like draw cards and then gets you a treasure token, a 1/1 pilot that can crew vehicles that have power 2 or greater. Um, which means that it could like pilot the Bank Buster and you just have a 4/4. Uh, all these other cards, you see like Darksteel Citadel in the sideboard. Sometimes you'll see like the Treasure Cove land or whatever that can make like a ton of treasure tokens. You'll see that as like your land that you can fetch from the sideboard with Karn. You have Tormod's Crypt for the graveyard decks, Pithing Needle more than likely for probably the mirror match and things like that, and like other decks that have like big planeswalkers, kind of like blue-white control and things like that. Damping Sphere is kind of good in the mirror, kind of bad because you shut off your own Nykthos, but then again, you shut off your opponent's Nykthos. Playing against decks like the Lotus Field deck, you can grab Damping Sphere and put a damper on their feelings. Mono Red, the Atarka Red decks that can play like multiple spells in a turn. Damping Sphere will make it hard for them. Although a little bit slower in those matchups, like that is a possibility of something that you could do if you're not ready to get any of the other stuff. Chesmongoforing Wand can be removal, replacing your opponent's things with 2/4s, but 2/4s really do not beat anything in this deck, and all of its other creatures beat the 2/4s that the wand makes, so that's pretty sweet. You have Ancestral Statue that returns a non-land permanent you control to its owner's hand. This is a way that you could reset and like rebuy like Cavalier Thorns just to get another ETB. You can use it to like pick up a Karn, recast a Karn, and do some other things. Sky Sovereign is just like more removal, even though again that is like huge. You could also just bounce itself to your hand. Don't know why you'd want to do that, but that is an option that you can do. Iska's Chariot, a card that, you know, kind of like the staple of like Pioneer, was really good in Standard. Continues to just be a very, very good and very powerful card just for Pioneer, period. Having one on the sideboard to go fetch isn't bad. We talked about the Chainville, more flagships because you can never have enough boats. God Pharaoh statue can really like lock your certain opponents just from playing Magic by making their spells cost 2 more and making it very hard for them to interact. Meteor Golem, just another way to put a body into play and destroy a non-land permanent that your opponent controls. And that's the Mono Green slash Nykthos ramp deck for the Pioneer format. The deck continues to innovate. We did see like a while ago that they were playing Nicobolus like God Pharaoh in conjunction with the Oath of Nissas and things like that because you could cast it with all like the green mana and all that, and it was like another way to kind of win the game after going off with like Chain Veil, Kiora, and Karn, so on and so forth. The deck in the way that it is iterated now, I would not be surprised if it drew any unwanted attention from getting banned. At this point, I could see like Karn the Great Creator going just for the fact that like the big thing is just like getting to Restorative Burst slash like get Pestilent Cauldron, or maybe you could just outright ban this card because other than that, it's not really playable. Um, but aside from that, as long as the deck is in the current iteration that it is, I believe that it gives itself the best chance and lends itself the best chance of having the best matchups possible against across the format, and we'll continue to see tons and tons of play. I mean, this has in no way, shape, or form has like the black red mid range deck or any other aggro decks knocked off Mono Green as being one of the best decks, or even bringing a question that Mono Green is one of the best decks in the format to play. And honestly, there should be no doubt if you decide to build and play this deck that you are playing a suboptimal version or whatnot. Definitely Mono Green has proven that it has many different phases and faces it can put on, where if you are playing in a more aggressive meta, like this deck is probably a little bit better of a build. If you're playing against like a more maybe controlling or like combo oriented, it does have a way to kind of combat the other combo decks and things like that. So definitely a deck that offers some flexibility. Just with changing out a few cards, you are able to shore up some other matchups in the main deck, which can go for a lot of decks, but Mono Green gets to do it in a very unique way. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, of course, leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel, as always, and ring the notification bell so you know when I post videos like this. Of course, other modern content and other Magic content in general. Please be sure to also go to the link in the description of this video. You can go join the Discord server as well. Talk about Magic and talk about why Mono Green just really needs to go away from the Pioneer format and just leave it alone. But yeah, that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next one.